So what happens when the government decides to solve humanity's biggest problems, but at the same time it kicks off a $30 billion corporate gold rush? Well, that's exactly what's happening right now with a new initiative called the Genesis Mission, and it tells a really fascinating story about how the future gets built, both in the public eye and behind the scenes.
Now look, this is not just another government program. In the official executive order, the White House makes this absolutely stunning comparison. They say the Genesis mission is comparable to the Manhattan Project. I mean, when you hear that, you know we're talking about something on a truly historic scale.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the government's huge vision. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the plan. After that, we're going to dive into that $30 billion scramble, meet the companies trying to get a piece of it, and figure out how they plan to win. And finally, we'll tie it all together and talk about why this whole thing matters so much.
Okay, first up, let's dig into that official story, the government's incredibly ambitious vision for the future of science.
So the big idea here, and this is straight from the executive order, is to build this one single massive AI platform. Think about it. They're going to take decades of scientific data the government has collected, all of it, and feed it into these powerful AI models to supercharge new discoveries. We're talking about things like creating new medicines faster, designing brand new materials, and finding huge breakthroughs in clean energy.
You know, a huge vision is great, but how do you actually make something on this scale happen? Let's take a look at the blueprint for the mission.
Okay, so the chain of command here is super clear. The president sets the big vision, the top science advisor coordinates everything. But here's the key thing. The person really in charge, the one who has to make this all a reality, is the Secretary of Energy. The buck stops there, working through the Department of Energy and its incredibly powerful national labs.
Now you're probably thinking, okay, this sounds like a 20-year plan, right? Well, wrong. Take a look at these deadlines. In 60 days, they need to ID 20 national challenges. In 90, map out all the computing power. And get this, in just 270 days, that's less than 9 months, they have to show a working version of this platform. This is a flat-out sprint, not some leisurely marathon.
All right, so that's the public side of the story, the grand mission. But hiding just beneath the surface is something else, one of the single biggest business opportunities we've seen in a long, long time. Yep, $30 billion. That's the estimated prize pool here over the next decade. And you can bet with a number that big, the corporate scramble is officially on. And this is where things get really interesting, because our other source comes into play, a corporate strategy guide called the Genesis Mission Playbook. It's basically the unofficial manual, the insider's guide to the real game that's being played behind the scenes to win a slice of that $30 billion pie. So who's in on this game? The playbook breaks it down into a few key types of players, or archetypes, and each one has some serious strengths, but also some really critical weaknesses. First, you've got the titans, right? The cloud hyperscalers, think Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Their strength is a no-brainer. They have basically unlimited computing power. But here's their weak spot. They don't really know how to play the government contracting game. It's a whole different world with its own rules, especially with an agency like the Department of Energy. Then you've got the AI natives. These are the small, agile startups with the absolute bleeding-edge tech and the smartest people. Their strength is pure, raw innovation. But look at their gaps. They've got the best tech, but they can't even get in the door. No security clearances, not enough cash, and zero track record with the government. It's a huge problem for them. So, what if you're not one of the big dogs? What do? Well, the playbook is super clear on this. Don't even try to compete head-on. Instead, it points to 3 really smart plays. Team up with a big, established company as their subcontractor, go after smaller research grants, or become the go-to expert for one very specific niche skill that nobody else has. Okay, so with all these different companies in the mix, how do you actually win? This is where the playbook gets really, really juicy, because its main piece of advice is totally counterintuitive. It's not about what you'd think at all.
So let me ask you this. You've got a $500 million contract. Who do you think really makes more profit? Is it the giant prime contractor whose name is all over the press release? Or is it their smaller, specialized subcontractor working behind the scenes? Okay, the answer is kind of mind-blowing. Check out this model from the playbook. The prime contractor gets that big, flashy headline number, $500 million in revenue. But follow that row over to total profit, just $5 million. Now look at the subcontractor. Way less revenue, only $75 million, but their profit?
almost $10 million, they're making nearly double the profit on a fraction of the revenue. It's because the prime is carrying all the risk and all the overhead. The sub just comes in, does its high-value, specialized thing and collects a much bigger margin. And that ROI, a return on investment of over 3,000%, that's just insane.
So the playbook's bottom line here is crystal clear. For most companies out there, the smartest play, the most profitable play, isn't to be the big name on the contract. It's to be the absolutely essential subcontractor. That's the winning move. All right, so we've got these two stories running in parallel, right? The government's amazing scientific dream on one side and this intense corporate Hunger Games on the other. Let's pull it all together and look at the real big picture.
And this really sums it all up perfectly. The mission has these two big goals. On one hand, yes, it's about making huge scientific breakthroughs, solving these major national problems. But on the other hand, it's also designed from the ground up to be a massive economic engine, creating a huge market for American tech and making sure the US stays on top in the global AI race. So for this to be a real success, it has to hit both targets. You need world-changing science and a booming new market.
And that really brings us to the central question, doesn't it? When you look at the Genesis mission, what are you really seeing? Is it the dawn of a new era of discovery that's going to change the world for the better? Or is it just a new kind of gold rush, funded by taxpayers for a bunch of contractors? You know, the real answer is it's probably both.